Hello and welcome to another episode of the Field of 68's off-season grades. My name is Rob Dauster. I have John Fanta here with me today, and we're going to be talking about the Texas Tech Red Raiders, who had an interesting offseason, I think it's fair to say, Fanta. They lost Pop Isaacs, Joe Toussaint, Warren Washington, a couple other lesser-used players, and they brought back a couple key pieces, Darion Williams, Chance McMillan, Devin Cambridge, Kerwin Walton specifically. And they went out and they got Elijah Hawkins, Federico, Kevin Overton, and the big one was JT Toppin. I am very curious to see how this team ends up panning out for a couple of different reasons, not the least of which is they kind of made the decision that if they were going to spend a lot of money on one player, they wanted it to be someone that wasn't Pop Isaacs and somebody that was more similar, apparently, to JT Toppin and Elijah Hawkins. So, what do you make of what Grant McCasland did this offseason with the Red Raiders, and what do you make of Texas Tech's season coming up?
Well, I think that when you look at Grant McCasland's year one, you would say a resounding success, right? They came into the year. We were unsure of exactly what they would be. What do? They go 23. They win 23 games in the toughest conference in college basketball. They go 23-11. Yes, the first round of the NCAA tournament, that was disappointing. But who did they lose to? A team in NC State that ended up going all the way to the Final Four. So I don't know about you, but we had question marks, right? Next to Texas Tech heading into last year of exactly how good they would be. And I thought for a good portion of the season, they ended up being better than that and ended up doing a lot of really good things. And they beat Kansas by 29 in their own building. Even though it was a shorthanded Kansas at the time, that was still, a highlight to their season, among other things. Went into Texas and won and had a couple other really notable victories along the way. For me, what I look at with what they did this offseason, it's quite interesting for a variety of reasons, because JT Toppin was a guy who went to the draft combine, went to Chicago, and actually impressed quite a bit along the way. And I think, Rob, that he fits the mold of a potential pro with his length and versatility. Oh, to see what he just did in 1 year of college, coming in and averaging 12 and 9 and 2 blocks per game. The performances, a double-double in the Mountain West Championship game to beat San Diego State. Like, this kid is skilled. He was a terrific get when they got him. I think for them, you have a different looking perimeter. There's no doubt about it here with Elijah Hawkins and with Chance McMillan. And then with Darion Williams, you're right. This is going to be a different looking basketball team because gone are Pop Isaacs and Joe Toussaint and Devin Cambridge. So I'm interested to see how Williams and McMillan now take this on in this situation, take on these roles, and Devin Cambridge is back.
Warren Washington. You meant Warren Washington.
Warren Washington gone. I'm interested to see how some of these guys take on different roles. And I think my biggest thing is, Rob, who's the centerpiece? What so many times last year, Rob, they were able to rely on Pop to hit some big time shots and to step up in big time spots for them. Now they had, 5 guys in double figures. So they had some balance. But I think for me, it's going to be interesting to see who takes the torch for this team and how they play, because they've got talent. They've got versatility. I want to see how it all pans out.
Yeah, I think I really like the process that Grant McCasland had when he put together this roster, right? He went out and he got a point guard who can make threes and is one of the best facilitators at the high major level. Elijah Hawkins averaged 9.5 points, 7.5 assists. Shot 38% from three, first season transferring in from Howard, right? And you surround him with a bunch of guys that are versatile, kind of long, and can make shots. Kerwin Walton shot maker, right? Chance McMillan, shot maker, dead eye shooter. Darion Williams is one of the best, like, kind of versatile glue guy kind of pieces that you're going to find. Kevin Overton was a freshman at Drake, averaged 11 points. That's good. I think will end up being a good shooter.
Yeah.
Federico is like a stretchy, long, athletic 5-man. Christian Anderson is a guy that I know a lot of Indiana fans did not want to have decommit from Indiana. So I get it in theory. My biggest thing is that I don't know if JT Toppin, I thought he had a really, really good year for New Mexico. I don't know if he's good enough to be the guy that you uh, invest in as much as they did and have him be the cornerstone as a 5-man. And he could be, right? Like, I'm not saying he's not. I'm saying that you have a guy that is probably, he's listed at 6'9". I think he's closer to like 6'7". He's 210 pounds. He's not a great shooter. He doesn't really get to the free throw line. Um, what is he going to end up being when you go from playing in the Mountain West to playing in the Big 12? And that is kind of like my biggest concern. But if what you're saying is we got a bunch of guys that are going to be able to switch and do different things defensively, and he's going to be someone that is kind of our rim runner, kind of our mismatch guy that we're going to try to take advantage of by pulling people away from the basket and creating space to let him go at people. Like, I get it in theory, but I think that there are a lot of leaps of faith that you have to take to be able to look at this team and say, okay, that team is going to be a top 25 team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that they're a top 25 to 30 team. I do think they're a top 30 team in college basketball. There's nothing wrong with that. They're unfortunately for them, they're in a league that has what, 4 top 10 teams.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know that Kansas, we know that Houston, we know that Iowa State. I'm going to put Baylor in there. Like that
Arizona could be in that conversation as well.
in the conversation as well. So it's hard. Like if they finish 6th in the league, they'll be the best 6th place finisher in a league in the country.
Yes,
because they're not that bad. I think from my standpoint, I agree with you, and that's just it. They're paying Toppin the money to be the centerpiece of this equation. But they do have others that can certainly contribute in that area. I mean, Elijah Hawkins is fascinating. You said it. One of the elite distributors in the country, if not a guy that very well lead the country in assists here with the 7.5 assists per game that he had last year. He was phenomenal. And I think for McMillan and Williams to be back, like that's a big thing, Rob. They do have roster retention.
yes, that's huge. It's huge.
That's
it's very,
huge
very
in this
important.
day. That's huge in this day. So I like this team. They're a tournament team for me. We'll talk about honest expectations here in a moment, but I think they can be a second weekend team. When you lose like they did in the first round of the NCAA tournament in year 1 under staff, that's going to fuel a Chance McMillan. That's going to fuel a Darion Williams. Devin Cambridge went down to injury, but that's going to fuel him. I'm with you. I like the get of Kevin Overton. 6'5" guard who did average over 11 points per game on a Drake team last year that had rich success, right? And in the NCAA tournament, lost a great game to Washington State, but he played a good role for that team and could be a really interesting piece. I think for me, Grant McCaslin and his staff took Federico. You got to find a way to tap into something here. You bring him in. He's big. He's got the size, but the productivity, 6'11", 225. Productivity has not been there. He's averaged about 5 and 5 a game. Can they get him, Rob? Can they get him to be 8 and 8 per game? Can they say, here's what our realistic expectation is for you. Here's where we want you to climb. We want you to be a 5-man in our system that gives us a different dimension. Yeah, we're versatile, but with Federico, you're going to be our enforcer. He's good for 5 fouls. He's good in the Big 12 in terms of physicality. You've got to take on that role because when they bring him in, that's what I'm envisioning for him. I'm not envisioning for him to be a 10 to 12 point per game guy. He has not been that in his college career, but he's got to give me more than what he's been given at Pitt.
Yeah. So I think they're more of a high ceiling. We'll talk about the X factor here in a second because I want to get into the expectations because you could just kind of touch on it right there. I think they're more of a high ceiling, low floor team than people realize, especially on a night to night basis. Um, the Big 12 is going to be brutal. It's not just the teams you mentioned that could all be like in the top 12 in the preseason, right? I think Kansas State has a chance to be a top 25 team this season. I think that BYU is going to be more interesting than a lot of people realize. I think Cincinnati is a really good team that has a
They
chance
are.
to be top 25 as well. And I'm not going to count out Texas either. Like, I think that there's 9 teams. If you were to sit here and tell me they are going to be a top 25 this season, I probably wouldn't argue with you, especially in the preseason. And
Did you
Texas
say
Tech,
Texas?
yeah, I think you can put together an argument that Texas is, but I
Hey,
wouldn't.
hey, SEC.
Oh shit, you're right. My bad.
No, no, it's
That's the first time I've come to that so far this year. Oh man, that's a rough one. Um anyway, I do think that Texas Tech is a higher ceiling, lower floor team than people realize. And I think one of the big reasons why is you're kind of betting on this idea that you could be like the floor spacing, make a bunch of threes kind of a team. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out.
yeah. The Big 12 is stacked with depth, and you're right. Like it's certainly not their fault. It's just part of the equation when you're playing in this league that like now Cincinnati with their roster continuity, and with Day Day Thomas and Jizzle James and Simas Lukosius, like that team is going to be really, really interesting. And we have not talked about Cincinnati basketball being that much on the map in quite some time.
Long
Or
time.
feels like
Long
that,
time.
a long time. So they're one example of BYU still going to be a good team, and you said it, Kansas State now with what Kansas State's been able to do in bringing in Coleman Hawkins and the transfer portal haul that they got. But I think Texas Tech did well for themselves. And I think that Hawkins, McMillan, and Williams on the perimeter is going to be something special. I think, look, the Mountain West had a banner year in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
It was a power conference like league. It was. It was basically a power conference this past year, the level that that league was playing at. Don't sit here and try to argue, well, they stunk in the tournament, and so that now forms your total view on the league. Folks, tournament success is not always have to do with what your team or what your league did in the regular season. The tournament's a one-game playoff. What am I trying to say? I've seen enough things, heard from enough scouts, heard enough good things, seen enough good things about JT Toppin where it looks good, it feels good, it sounds good, it's got to be good. If he was going to come back to college, it's going to be to level up. He's leveling up in the Big 12. You're getting paid that type of money. I trust Grant McCasland as a coach. I
Mm-hmm.
trust his staff. I think he's a heck of a coach. I really do. I believe that Texas Tech will be a top 30 team, and I believe that they can make the Sweet 16 this year. And I believe JT Toppin has real pro upside because his game fits a lot of what the NBA is today.
Yeah, I'll be very curious. We could talk about the X Factor now. Um, I think that the key to the season for Texas Tech is going to be the development of JT Toppin. I think that the X factor is like what is the adjustment like for Elijah Hawkins to the Big 12? The Big 12 has dogs, right? We're talking about like you're going up against DeJuan Harris and what he can do defensively. We're talking about you're going up fifth-year All-American point guard Jeremy Roach at Baylor, right? We're talking about you're going to have to go up and deal with Tamin Lipsey at Iowa State, right? They're that is not an easy adjustment to make. And I think that as a 5'11, 165-pound point guard, that is something where I think it's doable. And I don't think that he's incapable of having that success, but I think that it is something where like he's in for a test that I don't think he's seen before for a full season of Big 12 basketball. Whether you are a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all understand the importance of mental and physical well-being and proper recovery for top-notch performance. After a 6-month season loaded with cross-country travel, I can promise you that proper recovery is a priority for me these days. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Field of 68. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or the EE system. If you haven't heard of the EE system yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New Jersey or at one of the hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. If you're interested in experiencing the EE system technology for yourself, go to unifiedhealing.com/unified68 to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/UNIFYD, the number 6, the number 8. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment, and before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, including the EE system.
He's in for a test, and you hit that button. Point guard play.
Point guard play.
Now, you have over 7 assists per game at Minnesota, who ended up exceeding expectations last year and ended up putting together some good basketball, but wasn't he a part of that? He was a big part of that. And so now he wants to be part of a winning program and a winning team. Like, one big thing with transfers, right? And this is where your level up comment makes sense. Elijah Hawkins has put up the numbers. At the end of the day, he's put up numbers on losing basketball teams, right? Like, now he's making the move for a team that intends to win at a high level and intends to win meaningful games in March. So for him, this is going to be a transition. And as you just said, like, you're going in the same league that DeJuan Harris exists in. And a whole lot. I mean, look at Houston's guards. Milo Suzan, LJ Cryer. You got Emmanuel Sharp on the perimeter there. And we can go right down the line. Tamin Lipsey, Keyshawn Gilbert. Tamin Lipsey is in this league. So you're right. There are no off nights. Jeremy Roach is now in this league. Feels weird to say that, doesn't it?
It's so weird. Almost as weird as saying that Texas Tech, that Texas is in the SEC.
Yeah, that's right. I think that for me, what's the X factor? It's the 5 slot. Because if they're very weak at center, you could have all the versatility in the world, but eventually you're going to get beat by somebody because you just don't have enough firepower there. How do they figure out their front court situation? You know this, Rob. In this league, which not only has the guard plays, but Hunter Dickinson is in this league, and Jawan Roberts and Xavier Francis are 2 men. And we go right down the line and talk about that at the opposite end of the spectrum of the big men in this league, with Norchad Omier now at Baylor. Like, if you're going to be one of the heavyweights in this conference, and Texas Tech fans want them to be and believe that they're going to be, do you have the big men to hang in with those other rebounding big men? And that's why, for me, I think with Texas Tech, good offseason. I see a lot of.
Give me a grade. Give me a grade.
I'm going to give them. I'm going to give them an A-. I think. Wow. I think for where their program stands, this was a quality offseason with ads that make sense to me. So I'm going to give Texas Tech an A- because I think for them, especially in this wacky climate, I know they lost Pop Isaac, so that could downgrade it to a B. But I'm gonna be a little bit generous here, and I think Toppin's gonna pan out. if JT Toppin becomes a superstar, that A minus looks really, really nice. And
Mhm.
so I'm going to bet on that, and I'm going to trust Grant McCaslin here in year 2. I'm going to give him an A minus.
So I went with the feel kind of dumb saying it out, but I went with a C plus. And here's my logic.
Oh, that's
I
a big
think
difference.
yeah, I think my biggest question is they have a lot of guys that I would qualify as really good pieces, right? As guys that would be really good role players. And I look at them and I ask myself, where's the star? Where's the difference maker, right? Where is someone that can go out and win a game for you? And one of those guys that it could have been is now playing for Creighton and Pop Isaacs. So you don't get Pop Isaacs back. And then the guy that you bring in um, to kind of be the fulcrum for what you're running isn't the great Osborne, and it isn't some of these other guys that they went after. It's JT Toppin, who I think will be a good player, but I don't know if he is going to be the superstar that you need to be able to finish like top 5 in the Big 12. I think they have a tournament team caliber roster here, right? I think they are a team that is borderline top 25 ish in the preseason. I probably wouldn't have them preseason top 25, but I get the argument for them preseason top 25. But I just, with the money that they had to spend in the portal, I don't know if they necessarily used it the most efficient way that they could. And I just question where is the game changer on this roster? Pop Isaacs, I had questions about him before last season, and he proved me wrong and made me look silly for some of those questions that I had for him. And now
Right.
I am looking at it and I'm like, I'm still in the same spot where I have a lot of those same questions. And if I get proven wrong, you know what? I will take that L. It's not the first time that I've taken an L, but we will see. So that's kind of where I stand with them. Listen, Fanta, always fun to talk hoops with you. That was the offseason grade for the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you in the next episode.